Today, Triumph announced a new 2025 version of their Speed Triple 1200 RS Naked with a whole bunch of updates all through the bike. So in this video, we'll go through all of the details with the 12 key things that you need to know about it. Now, the first thing worth mentioning is that there'll no longer be an RR model, as it's been discontinued for the new model year, and so that just leaves the one bike with the RS, although I am hoping this new updated version kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You see, while the previous generation RS was a decent bike and certainly blisteringly quick, one of the common complaints that I've seen from owners in forums and also in some of the reviews was that the suspension was kind of on the firm side. It seems as though in search of razor sharp handling, they built something that perhaps wasn't so supple on the road, and that kind of detracted from the versatility and day-to-day usability that had previously helped to establish the Speed Triple brand as a good seller. Then, about a year after that, they introduced this fabulous looking RR version, which I guess was a bit of a modern cafe racer take with the half fairing and the single round headlight. Now, on the one hand, this did sort of fix the suspension side of things because it came with Öhlins semi-active electronically adjustable suspension, which, like any other semi-active system, softens up when you're cruising along, but then firms back up immediately when you need it, when you're accelerating or braking or cornering. For me, it's the perfect addition to a bike like this that's built to be a bit of an all-rounder, but still, the RR wasn't necessarily a great seller, and I think for anyone who's set foot inside a Triumph dealer in the last year or two, you probably already suspected as much if you've seen the really significant discounts that they've been offering on this particular model. My guess is that with the more aggressive riding position with the clip-on style bars, it just wasn't comfortable enough in that sense for the target audience, especially when you also consider that they were more than $2,000 extra versus the RS, so you probably wouldn't want to pay more money for a less comfortable bike. That kind of meant the RS was uncomfortable in the suspension, the RR in the sort of ergonomics, but that's where this new bike ought to be the perfect combo. As per the previous gen, you've still got that upright naked riding position, but now you do get the Öhlins semi-active electronic suspension, which should help to offer a more comfortable ride when you need it, while still preserving that sporty ability when you do start to ride a little bit harder. In fact, this bike could potentially go one better because it now gets the latest generation Smart EC3 system, which follows on from Öhlins' widely used EC2, and I think the key difference is that it now gets their OBTI or Öhlins Objective-Based Tuning Interface. Basically, instead of saying you want more or less damping in the fork or shock and having to have a bit of kind of technical knowledge as to what effect that'll have on the handling of the bike, this one allows you to change it through the switchgear and dash based on a specific riding objective. So it could be more or less support under braking, the same for support under acceleration, and also you've got settings for fork and shock firmness, as well as initial acceleration support, cornering support, and cruising support. So I think what you've got here is a much simpler interface when it comes to twiddling with your suspension by taking away the requirement for that technical knowledge, and effectively this just allows you to say, I like how the bike handles through corners or under braking, but I do want it to feel a little more cushy when I'm cruising at a constant speed. I should say though that if this all sounds a little bit too complex for you and you do have that technical knowledge, then you can also switch to a manual mode that just allows you to dial up and down the damping, and perhaps that's good if you want a consistent response without the kind of variability of the semi-active if you're a more experienced track rider, for example. But I think for the majority of riders, the objective-based tuning interface actually sounds much more usable and easy to understand, and you can also, through the dash, input your weight and it'll compensate with all of the settings to make the ride appropriate for your personal mass. On top of that though, this bike now gets an adjustable steering damper. There's no specifics in the press release as to why, and I don't remember the previous generation being overly twitchy, but perhaps good to know it's there all the same. And I will say one of the changes that they have made is slightly lighter wheels versus the previous generation, so perhaps that could be something to do with it. These should be quicker to turn with less gyroscopic effect, and so you could expect slightly more lively handling from this newer generation. And I will say I do think they look pretty good too, especially at the rear with that single-sided swing steering arm. That said, total weight is actually ever so slightly up at 199 kilograms wet versus the 198 of the previous gen, so there aren't any weight savings overall as a result of these lighter wheels. As for the rest of the chassis spec, well, it looks to be very much the same as the previous gen with the same aluminium twin spar frame. You still get those high-spec Brembo style brake calipers up front, and there's an MCS span and ratio adjustable lever. And again, tyres are from Pirelli with their Super Corsa SP V3s. Onto the engine though, and this one was already a bit of a beast with an 1160cc inline triple that made 180 PS or 177.5 horsepower at 10,750 RPM. It was already absolutely rapid, but those in search of every little bit of extra peak power will be pleased to know that for 2025 it gets another 3 PS and it's made at the same point in the rev range. On top of that, peak torque also goes up, so you've now got 128 Newton meters versus 125, and it is made ever so slightly lower in the revs at 8,750 RPM as opposed to 9,000 on the previous gen. Now look, out on the road, this probably isn't going to feel night and day quicker, but it is still a nice little increment, and they've apparently found most of it from the new stubby exhaust system, which has been redesigned to be a little more free-flowing. Also, for the first time I believe on a speed triple, this one will now be available with an Akropovich official accessory, which gets all the premium materials like the carbon finisher and the titanium body for a bit more of a classy look to it. Now, there are no claims from Triumph as to any extra power or any meaningful improvement in terms of sound, but for me, looking at the pics, I will say it does add a little something visually. One thing they didn't say a great deal about in the press briefing call that we always have for these new bike announcements, but it is in the press release, is the fact that the engine now has a revised dynamic crankshaft balancing strategy for a significant improvement, they say, in engine refinement. And now triples are generally, in my experience, fairly smooth, although they can generate a little bit of buzz at certain points, especially as the revs start to climb. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's any noticeable difference with this one when I get round to reviewing one. There are a few other updates to cover though. One is the ergonomics, and while the general riding position is very much the same with the same 830mm seat height, they have changed the shape of the handlebars so they're a little bit wider and also have a slight upward flick. The width, they say, gives you a touch more leverage for easy turning and also provides some extra comfort. And whereas the previous gen's bars were slightly flatter, these ones rise up to the outside. And so in practice, when you're sat on the bike, you could be ever so slightly more upright in your back angle. On the tech front, it still gets the absolute works with a 5-inch color TFT display that gives you some connectivity features, 5 riding modes, cornering ABS and traction control, a quick shifter, cruise control, and keyless ignition, which also includes the filler cap and the steering lock. On top of all that though, there are a few new additions when it comes to the more advanced settings, one of which is a new front wheel lift control that's separate from the traction control now. With this, you can choose from 4 different levels, and it ties in with the inertial measurement unit to understand the pitch of the wheelie that it's currently holding. Then you've now got customizable engine brake control for the first time, and also a new brake slide assist feature providing you're running it in the track mode. Specifically, this is said to allow for a little more front wheel slip and also some rear wheel lift, and so it should help to make the ABS feel a little less intrusive if you're really riding hard on track while still having that final safety net. Looks wise, well, it's more of a little tweak here and there than a massive overhaul, but you do get the new wheels, a revised seat cowl, some black finishing on the hardware like the triples and the radiator shrouds, and also a few new paint jobs with some updated graphics. Now the base model, so the most affordable, comes in jet black with some red accents, but for those willing to pay a little more on top, you can either choose from Triumph Performance Yellow or a Diablo Red. Personally, I think these are a big improvement, both of them, over the previous generation finishes. Although I will say, with that Diablo Red, they must have had a look at the Ducati Street Fighter V4 SP2. The little red stripe on the tail section looks super similar. They've also painted the tank, which gives it a bit of the look of that bare aluminium tank on the Street Fighter, and even the front end has a bit of the same look. But I will say it's by no means a bad thing, and I think this new finish looks absolutely fantastic on the Speed Triple. So look, plenty of nice little updates here and there, but it is worth adding that the price has shot up quite significantly by a good 1,700 quid. Previously, you see, the RS was 15,700 16,795, whereas now for 2025 it comes in at 17,495. To be fair though, you've got that massively upgraded suspension. I think they were saying it's not on many bikes yet either, the EC3, pretty much just the Panigale V4, which is new for 2025, and maybe the most recent Fireblade. Then you've got the extra power, the extra tech, the better paint jobs in my opinion, and so potentially you could say it's justified, although I do believe that suspension is going to be the most significant advancement. Also, keep in mind that the now discontinued RR model, well, that was even more, that was 17,950, or at least it's RRP anyway. As always though, I'd love to know what you think of it, so do let me know down in the comments below, and if you want to watch my review of the previous generation ahead of getting this new one to test, then I'll stick it on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch in case you haven't already. Also, do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.